Finally, we're turning bowls. Today, we are continuing our How to Start Wood Turning series by turning our first bowl. Stick around and we'll have you hooked on turning bowls in no time. Welcome to Turning Stitches, I'm Sean. We help wood turners learn the craft to begin making fun projects faster. Let's keep building on your faceplate turning skills by making a small bowl. If you missed our first faceplate hollowing project, a small lidded box or salt cellar, in Lesson 8, you can find it here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you'll know when our next lesson is posted and make it easy to follow along. Bowls are a lot of fun to turn and they can create those long stringy ribbons of shavings you see online. So let's start making shavings. I'm starting with a bowl blank that I made from a 1x8 from the home center. I glued 3 layers together that are roughly 7 1/4 by 7 1/4. Before I go to the lathe, I'll get the blank roughly round at the bandsaw. Before we get to the lathe, we need to attach our waste block to our blank. Now the waste block, I'm actually just reusing the waste block that we made in Lesson 7 for our penny plate. And if you missed Lesson 7, you can find it right up here. So today, I'm going to align that, and I'm just going to use hot glue. In Lesson 7, we use wood glue, which is probably the best way, but today I'm going to use a little bit of hot glue instead of wood glue. We'll talk a little bit more about why later, but I'm going to let that dry for a moment. For scroll chuck turning today, we're going to use a wormwood screw to initially mount our blank to the lathe. Most chucks will come with a wormwood screw. If not, you can buy one. But I'm just going to drill a pilot hole in the center, drill a shallow hole here, and then we'll put our wormwood screw in when we get over to the lathe. With our hot glue, I'm also going to put a little bead out here on the outside, right around the waste block and our workpiece. Hot glue is not quite as secure as wood glue, so the best holding method, or most secure holding method, is using wood glue, but it is a lot faster to use the hot glue. With that ready, we'll get over to the lathe and start turning. We've made it to the lathe and we've got our piece with the faceplate mounted and ready to go. Our first step is just to get the outside diameter round, and we're going to flatten this face right here. So let's get started. To use our scroll chuck, the first thing we want to do is to get a tenon on our workpiece. So we've already pre-drilled a hole for the wormwood screw piece, kind of turned onto the screw, and that'll hold it onto the lathe. We want to be careful as we snug this up, not to strip out the screw, but we want the workpiece to be tight, but also we want that face snugged up on the face of our chuck jaw. Okay, with that flat, we're just going to make a mark for our tenon. Might go a little over 2 inches. So here I'm just coming in, cutting in with my bowl gouge just inside that line where I want my tenon. And make our tenon roughly 1/4 inch. I like to use my skew chisel, and I'm just coming in here using the bevel, the angle of my chisel. Gets pretty close to the dovetail I need for my jaws. So I'm cutting right up here against the bottom of the bowl. And I don't have to be too aggressive, but I'm just letting that kind of work like a scraper. And then I'm going to make sure I'm nice and flat right here. With our tenon established on the bottom, our next step is just to take off this edge and get the exterior of our bowl shaped. So we're going to work from the tenon, and we just want to shape this corner off
So we're going to work from the base out to the rim until we've got all this waste material worked away. Okay, our bowl for the tenon is in pretty good shape. We'll flip it around and hollow it out. For our bowl using the faceplate, we're going to work from our outer edge. This will be the inside of the bowl over here toward the tailstock, and the bottom is going to be down here at the headstock where our waste block is. So we're going to work off this corner, and we'll use the waste block will kind of give us an idea. That'll be the diameter of our base, or the foot of our bowl will be pretty close to our waste block, which is about roughly 3 inches. So we'll work away this corner and get the outside of this bowl shaped. Now it can be a little more challenging to shape a bowl in this orientation, just because we may not be able to get our gouge all the way down to the waste block. Oftentimes this will produce a rough cut compared to using a tenon where we can go from the bottom to the rim. Even though I've got the bevel riding along here, you may still be tearing out some of the fibers. You may not get as smooth of a cut as if we were working from the base to the rim. So at this point, we're ready to hollow, and all I want to do is kind of get my depth. I always like to drill a depth hole, so I'm getting ready for that. I'm using a shop-made jig here, just a board and a dowel rod, effectively. So I'm leaving about a 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch gap there. So that'll just help us identify the bottom of our bowl, and with that measurement here set, then I'm just going to come over and mark that on my drill bit in about that same location. I've got my depth mark with the blue tape, so we'll just drill a hole right here in the center real quick using our drill chuck, and then we'll be ready to hollow this bowl. With our depth hole drilled, now all we need to do is take our bowl gouge and remove most of the waste. So now we're ready for the fun part. When I'm hollowing, I usually use a kind of a bevel supported cut like this. Just my preference, but you can reverse it around. You can sweep it out this way. It's personal preference on which way you like to do it. When I like to make these cuts, I like to oftentimes think of them as practice cuts, as if I'm finishing the bottom of the bowl and I want to get a nice smooth cut. So I have a lot of cuts that I can practice with here. So I've repositioned the tool rest just a little bit so I'm not hanging out quite as far over it. But you can see down here in the bottom, my swept-back bowl gouge is pushing up against the bottom of the bowl. It's really not wanting to remain engaged, or that bevel's not wanting to remain engaged all the way across the bottom. That is one of the downsides with this grind. So a lot of times once I get down close, I'll use a scraper to kind of get the rest of the way into the bottom, and we may need to do that here. But right out here, I'm going to go ahead and get my outside, kind of the rim established where I want it, and then we'll just kind of hollow down to that point. Okay, so all I want to do here, I'm going to use my cutter tool. I'm just going to work the bottom. Got enough of a wall thickness here, I can go ahead and come all the way out. Alright, once you're happy with the shape of your bowl, you're ready for sanding. Now, one of the challenges with bowls, and we always encounter this, is down here in the end grain sections, we usually get some torn out fibers. And we certainly have that here. We'll talk later in future videos about how to minimize this a little bit, but we certainly can just sand that out. And so that will be our approach today. So let's get this sanded up, and then we'll get this bowl removed from the waste block. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is to get the bowl off the waste block. We're going to trim the bottom just a little bit, and then I'm going to show you a trick with the hot glue to help get this bowl separated. One reason I like hot glue is oftentimes you can take a heat gun and just kind of heat this back up and pull the bowl, pull the workpiece right off the waste block. And then all we've got to do is clean up the glue, and we're ready to go. Our final step, if we were using the chuck, is to remove the tenon. Now I'm going to use my cold jaws here. You can use a jam chuck like we've used in previous videos, but this is the way I normally like to remove a tenon. Make sure you check, if you're using cold jaws or something similar to this, make sure you look at the maximum RPM that the manufacturer recommends. We're going to be turning about 600 RPMs, which is the kind of the max speed on this setup. But all we want to do, I'm going to use my smallest bowl gouge, and I'm just going to trim away this tenon very lightly, because I don't want to throw the bowl off the lathe if I can prevent it. Now in this case, I'm not going to remove the entire tenon. I'm going to use the material, or some of the material from the tenon, as a foot for the bowl. So as we work down here, we'll add just a little shape to do that. Okay, so we're pretty close to the depth I want. I'm going to leave this little foot here. I'm going to leave a little space here, and I'm just going to cut in just a little bit, kind of leaving this nub. So that gives me a little foot for my bowl. Just going to get that all set up there. Got a rough edge. Got to remove that. Make sure that's nice and flat, that's nice and smooth. And then all we have to do is remove the nub here in the center. So I want to be careful about that, because if I push too hard, I can easily spin that off. Bowls are so much fun, I probably don't have to encourage you to keep practicing. We found many uses for these in our home, from our home decor to use in the kitchen. We'll wrap up our lesson series next time by turning a vase, which will have a lot more hollowing. You'll want a blank that's 4 to 6 inches in diameter and 8 to 12 inches long. A small section of a log is great material for this next lesson. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you'll know when lesson 10 comes out, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next lesson.